Haha! Hello, everyone. I have found what I was looking for. Surprisingly, where I was looking for something completely different. So, I've discovered it. So I have found a few articles. I'm going to start with this one. Upload them as I have time to review or to read them. This one is from PubMed, National Library of Medicine. It's from January. Let's see, what do we got? 2020, published online. That's something different. Okay. The title of this research paper says Prenatal Exposure to Viral Infection and Neuropsychiatric Disorders in Offspring, a review of the literature and recommendations for the COVID-19 pandemic. The abstract reads like this: the SARS-CoV-2 virus has emerged as a striking 21st century pandemic. Communities across the globe have experienced significant infection rates and widespread psychosocial stress and trauma, leading to calls for increased allocation of resources for mental health screening and treatment. In addition to the burden of psychosocial stress, there is increasing evidence of direct viral neuroinvasion of the central nervous system through physical contact with the nasal mucosa. In a parallel fashion, there is a significant body of ongoing research related to the risk of in utero viral transmission and the resulting neurodevelopmental impact of the fetus. Aberrant, I think that's how you say that, neurodevelopment secondary to viral transmission has previously been related to the later development of psychosis, schizophrenia, and schizophrenia spectrum disorders, generating the hypothesis that this population of individuals exposed to SARS-CoV-2 may see an increased incidence in future decades. So we discussed the current understandings of the possible neurotropism and vertical transmission of SARS-CoV-2 and relate this to the history of viral pandemics to better understand the relationship of viral infection, aberrant immune response, and neurodevelopment and the risk for schizophrenia disorders. And so it's got the introduction here. Tells us evidence from previous influenza epidemics reveal a pattern of increased incidence of psychiatric conditions such as anxiety, insomnia, depression, and psychosis. During the influenza pandemic of the early 20th century, now known as the Spanish flu, now we know it as. The incidence of the inflammatory central nervous system disease, then known as encephalitis lethargic, was observed and increased, characterized by catatonia, Parkinsonism, and psychosis. The literature on psychosis and pandemics was initially built upon earlier ecological studies, extended by birth cohort studies, generational warfare, and now is further supported by several preclinical models. Both epidemiological and birth cohort studies have demonstrated an association between infections and corresponding increased incidences of schizophrenia spectrum disorders. It, in particular, has been demonstrated that in utero exposure to a variety of pathogens is likely to replicate risk factors for the neurodevelopment insults that contribute to the later onset schizophrenia spectrum disorder, among several other neuropsychiatric conditions. Giving the emerging association between prenatal infection and schizophrenia spectrum disorders, it is important that this risk is considered in the context of the unfolding pandemic. Here we're going to review the existing literature on links between these things and the increased incidences of schizophrenic spectrum disorder. In line with body of evidence reviewed, it is plausible that exposure to SARS-CoV-2 in utero may put children born during the pandemic at risk for specific neuropsychiatric outcomes, including schizophrenia. This presents a novel opportunity to study these. They're sick fucks. to study these offspring who may be considered to have an increased risk of neuropsychiatric symptoms later in life. So longitudinal monitoring of the population may be able to assist the discovery of complex, so they're prepared. They're getting prepared. And then they go through a list of past, what we had here with the H1N1, H3N2, blah, blah, blah. The rubella also had the same thing. The poliovirus saw the same thing. Herpes virus sees the same thing. Zika virus sees the same thing. HIV and Ebola, and of course, coronaviruses being in there. And let's see, that further supports the association between severe, so there's the SARS, COVID, and MERS. And so obviously there is a connection here. So we've got some studies here. Here's the things. Now, this isn't the only paper that's talking about these things. I have come across several, a lot of them very old. There's been an assumption of this for quite a few decades. And so I found that very interesting, as it's really the first time that I've seen it mentioned in all of the research that I've done. We will see an increase in these autism, psychiatric, or what is it called? Schizophrenic disorders, spectrum disorders, and so forth and so on. And so they're assuming that there's going to be an uptick. And all I can think is that for several years now, they have really been pushing the mental health narrative. I mean, really pushing it. Even in a little movie my wee one was watching, there was, they're talk about your feelings, and all of the little kids' cartoons from Dora the Explorer to Peppa Pig, and the trolls are talking about voicing your feelings. Don't hold it in. Tell everyone how you're feeling. And, to me, that's a sign of pre-programming. Am I saying that that's a bad thing? No, I'm saying we should all be aware of this. So when we're having people who are going around saying we're all going to have zombie apocalypse, I can only think that for a minute, these are the kind of symbols, if you will, that that is a representation of. It's a possibility of more of this behavior happening, especially since we have another worldwide pandemic, and now there's way more people, not to mention what the medications are that they put them on when they come up with these things, and then the side effects of those medications, which also cause more of these issues. It's almost like a magnifying glass that sparks it into fire. So here's the conclusion. The SARS-CoV pandemic has had a significant global impact and resulted in rates of viral infection previously unheard of in the 21st century. While explorations have been made previously into defining the relationship between viral pandemics and resulting risks of schizophrenia spectrum disorders, this work has been limited primarily to epidemiologic and birth cohort studies, with the only recent arrival of several preclinical models, including brain organoid models. The current rate of viral infection begets the unique opportunity to capitalize on a significant sample size to create a better understanding of the causality and mechanisms underlying viral immune activation and aberrant neurodevelopment in the risk of schizophrenia disorder and psychosis. With increased vigilance, there exists the opportunity to forward our understanding of this psychiatric phenomenon. It's supernatural. It is also affords the opportunity to reduce the impact of these diseases among future generations. And there's their grant number, and there's no conflict of interest. And here you've got their references. that they use evidence of maternal influenza contributes to schizophrenia from the Scottish, English, and Danish data. Again, these are consistently used. Dementia. So here they've got a lot of papers, and I have found a lot of papers. So this one is just one of the many that I may read here, just to really get the point across that they not only are aware, but they are preparing. My goodness, look at all these papers. So what do you think of this? Do you think that we have a secondary pandemic on our hands of psychiatric disorders stemming from I mean, look at all these papers. An unexpressed dread. That sounds interesting. I might have to click on that one. And so forth and so on. Psychosis of influenza. There's no abstract available. Yeah. Contracting schizophrenia, lessons in the influenza epidemic of 1918 and 1919. So, yeah, there's that quick synopsis there. You know, so are we going to see more problems? Could this be an answer to why we have poor locations, or those that don't have, you know, where they have a lot of, you know, they're being targeted with a lot of infections treated, you know, the gates like them. Foundations are a fan. Is this why they have such weird behaviors, seemingly psychiatric type behaviors, antisocial, somewhat off behaviors? Is that from being exposed during utero? I don't know. I'm just asking questions based off of the information that's being presented by all those smart people